The neighborhood was silent, the kind of heavy, suburban silence that usually feels peaceful, but as I stood in my kitchen, the air felt different, brittle. I was halfway to the door when the pounding started. Not a knock, not the polite rap of a neighbor asking for a cup of sugar. This was a rhythmic, aggressive percussion, the kind of sound that makes your stomach drop before your brain even processes the threat. I didn't rush. I'm not the type to be hurried by someone else's urgency. I took a slow sip of my coffee, set the mug down with a deliberate click, and walked to the door. I cracked it just a few inches. There they were, two men in black tactical-style uniforms, boots planted wide, shoulders squared, hands resting on their utility belts as if they were seconds away from a high-stakes breach. Their badges, shiny laminated squares swinging on cheap lanyards, caught the porch light. Instant red flag. "Sir, step outside," the taller one barked. He had that specific kind of failed the psych eval intensity in his eyes. "We need to verify your identity. Failure to provide ID will result in immediate action." I blinked at him, my expression a mask of bored curiosity. "Excuse me, who exactly are you?" "We're with the HOA Compliance Enforcement Unit," the shorter one said, puffing out his chest. He looked like he was wearing his older brother's uniform. The sleeves were just a bit too long. "You've ignored mandatory meetings. You're facing penalties. Hand over your ID." I didn't get angry, I didn't shout, I actually let out a small, dry laugh. "I'm not part of your HOA, I said, my voice low and steady. "Slow and clear for you, I don't belong." Both men stiffened. "That's a lie," the tall one snapped. "You are a member and refusing ID is grounds for detainment." My hand tightened on the door, but my pulse stayed level. "Detainment by who, you?" He leaned forward, lowering his voice into a gravelly whisper. "Sir, if you don't comply, we're authorized to use force." And that was the moment, the exact moment the fuse was lit. Before the Compliance Enforcement Unit decided to play soldier of fortune on my porch, my life was beautifully, wonderfully boring. I moved here for the quiet. Old couples walking labs, the smell of fresh-cut grass, and most importantly, no one telling me what color my front door should be. I've always had one rule when house hunting: no HOA, absolutely not. I'd heard the horror stories. Neighborhoods turned into mini dictatorships because someone's trash can was visible for 10 minutes past noon. I wanted no part of that petty, clipboard-wielding tyranny. For years, it was perfect. Then the community association formed. It started as a rumor. A few bored retirees and power-hungry middle managers decided they wanted a unified vision. Signs went up. "Improve property values. Join today." Here's the thing about newly formed HOAs in established neighborhoods: they aren't automatic. You have to opt in, you have to sign, you have to surrender your rights, and I very politely chose not to. At first, they treated my refusal like a clerical error. I got the welcome letter, ignored it. I got the handwritten note, recycled it. Finally, I sent a very civil, very firm response: "Thank you, but I am not interested. Best of luck." I thought that was the end. I was wrong. The letters became a daily ritual, then came the emails, then the texts. Action required, time-sensitive matter. It was like being stalked by a very persistent, very annoying telemarketer who lived 3 doors down. They even sent a benefits list. One of the bullet points was access to a more harmonious environment. Ironic, considering they were currently the only thing making my life discordant. I'd see them through my blinds, the founding members lingering on the sidewalk, pointing at my house, whispering. I wasn't a neighbor anymore. I was a holdout, a problem, a threat to the integrity of the community. Back on the porch, the officers were losing their patience. "We have you in our system," the short one insisted, tapping his clipboard like it was a holy relic. "Your system?" I asked. "Not the county's, not the state, just your little database." "It's official," the tall one snapped, holding up his laminated card. "You don't get to question enforcement credentials." I leaned in, pretending to study the badge. "This looks like it was printed at a Staples. Is that Comic Sans font? Bold choice for a lawman." The tall one's face turned a deep, blotchy shade of purple. "We need to see your ID. Now, if you have nothing to hide, you should have no problem showing us." "Or," I said, my voice dropping an octave, "I can follow the actual law which says I don't have to give my private information to 2 guys in polyester costumes on my own property." The shorter one slammed his clipboard shut. This isn't over, you're making this harder on yourself. They retreated to their patrol vehicle, a white SUV with magnetic decals on the doors, and I watched them go. I knew they'd be back. People with that little power don't let go of it easily. The next week was a psychological siege. They showed up at 6:00 a.m. They showed up at 10:00 p.m. My Ring camera was a constant stream of Tactical Timmy and his sidekick lurking on my porch. Then came the fines. $75 for noncompliance. $150 for failure to attend orientation. $250 for parking violations on my own driveway. I filed them all in a folder I'd started labeling exhibits. But then, the final letter arrived, the one that crossed the line from annoying to illegal. Failure to pay outstanding dues will result in foreclosure proceedings. They were threatened to steal my home because I wouldn't join their club. They thought they could scare me into submission. They thought I was trapped. They had no idea I'd been recording every second, every trespass, and every fraudulent threat. I wasn't trapped. I was just waiting for them to walk into the trap I'd already set. The climax happened on a Tuesday. I saw the SUV pull up, but this time they weren't alone. A third man was with them, the president of the HOA, a man named Miller who wore his sweater vest like a suit of armor. I didn't wait for the pounding. I opened the door before they reached the top step. I was holding a folder of my own. "Mr. Miller," I said, leaning against the doorframe, looking as relaxed as a man on vacation. "To what do I owe this visit?" "We're here to serve you," Miller said, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and self-importance. "Since you refuse to acknowledge our authority, we've filed a lien against your property. These officers are here to ensure you don't interfere with the process." The two officers shifted their weight, looking smug. The tall one reached for a pair of handcuffs on his belt. "Turn around, sir, we're taking you in for obstruction." I didn't move, I didn't flinch. "Before you do that, Miller, I think you should see this." I handed him a single sheet of paper. It wasn't a membership form. It was a copy of my original deed, stamped and verified by the county clerk alongside a cease and desist order from my attorney. "Read the highlighted section," I said. Miller fumbled for his glasses. As he read, the color drained from his face. This says. It says that not only am I not part of your HOA, but my property is legally excluded from any future associations due to a grandfather clause in the original land plot," I explained, my voice smooth and dangerous. "But more importantly, it says that you've been committing degree felony impersonation of a peace officer by sending these 2 units to my house." The tall officer froze, his hand still on the handcuffs. "I've also contacted the state attorney's office," I continued. "See that camera? It's recorded every threat of detainment, every fraudulent fine, and that lovely little letter about foreclosure. That's called racketeering and extortion, Miller. In this state, that's a 20-year sentence." We were just trying to maintain standards," Miller stammered, his sweater vest suddenly looking very small. "No," I said, stepping out onto the porch, forcing them to back up. "You were playing king, and these 2 were playing Gestapo, but the problem with playing a role is that eventually the curtain falls." Right on cue, 2 real police cruisers pulled into the cul-de-sac, their lights painting the neighborhood in red and blue. No sirens, just the quiet, heavy presence of actual authority. The look on the officers' faces was something I'll cherish forever. The tall one actually tried to hide his laminated badge behind his back. The shorter one looked like he was about to cry. "Officers," I called out as the real police stepped out of their cars. "These are the men I called about. They've been attempting to detain me on my private property while impersonating law enforcement." The real cops didn't move with the stiff, practiced ego of the HOA units. They moved with the efficient, bored precision of people who have seen it all. Within 3 minutes, the compliance enforcement unit was being patted down against their own SUV. Miller was shaking. "This is a misunderstanding. We're a board, we have bylaws." "Your bylaws don't supersede the penal code, Miller," the lead officer said, clicking a pair of very real, very heavy steel handcuffs onto the tall guy's wrists. "And you're coming downtown to talk about this foreclosure threat. That looks a lot like a shakedown to me." As they were being loaded into the back of the cruisers, I caught Miller's eye. He looked broken. The unified vision was crumbling right there on my driveway. "Wait," Miller croaked, "can't we just talk about this?" I smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of a man who had been poked one too many times and had finally decided to poke back. "I tried talking," I said. "I sent letters, I was polite, I was respectful, but you didn't want a neighbor, Miller, you wanted a subject. Well, congratulations, you finally got my attention." I watched the cruisers pull away, the red and blue lights fading into the distance. The neighborhood returned to that heavy, suburban silence. I picked up my coffee, which was still lukewarm, and took a sip. My lawn looked great, the mailboxes were mismatched, the environment was, finally, perfectly harmonious. I went inside and locked the door. It was a 17-minute ordeal from the moment the police arrived to the moment they left, long enough to change the neighborhood forever. I think tomorrow I might paint my front door bright orange, just because I can.